What's up, Internet? My name is Ralph, and welcome to the channel. Today, I wanted to just quickly touch on the fatal stabbing of a Ukrainian refugee on a Charlotte light rail by the name of Arenya Zarutska. It was a completely unprovoked attack. If you have not come across this yet on your news feed, it's really disgusting, really sad. I'm not going to bother showing the video or even clipping it because there's just nothing to learn from it. It is just a brazen attack. It happened so quickly. I don't even know that there are many self-defense tips to take from the situation other than maybe to just be aware of your surroundings at all times. So I've got this article here from CNN breaking down the stabbing just to get us all on the same page here in case you haven't heard about this incident yet. And towards the end, it has a statement from the mayor of Charlotte, who is apparently receiving some criticism about the statement. Now, I haven't actually looked to see what this criticism is. I imagine it's probably something along the lines of them not emphasizing the victim enough, and I could see where maybe you would be coming from if that was your position. Other than that, I really don't understand it, because I think ultimately what she says is, in fact, the truth. And I'm going to explain why I feel that way. So, real quick, we'll jump into the article. Video shows fatal stabbing of Ukrainian refugee on Charlotte light rail, stirring debate on crime in major cities by CNN. Gruesome video shows a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee getting stabbed to death on a Charlotte light rail train, a case that has turned into a flashpoint as the Trump administration vows to crack down on crime in large, predominantly Democratic cities. The unprovoked attack happened shortly before 10 p.m. August 22nd. The Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department said a caller said a woman was stabbed in the throat. The victim, Arenya Zarutska, fled Ukraine in 2022 with her mother, sister, and brother to escape the war with Russia, and she quickly embraced her new life in the United States, her obituary states. Video of the attack shows Zarutska entering a train car and taking a seat directly in front of the suspect, court documents state. The train travels for approximately 4.5 minutes before the suspect pulls a knife from his pocket, unfolds the knife, pauses, then stands up and strikes at the victim 3 times, a police detective wrote in an affidavit. Blood visibly drips on the floor as the defendant walks away from the victim. The victim goes unresponsive shortly after the attack. The defendant is the assailant on the video. There appears to be no interaction between the victim and defendant, the affidavit states. The suspect, 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown, was taken to a hospital for treatment of a laceration and charged with first-degree murder. A judge has ordered Brown to be evaluated for 60 days in a local hospital. CNN is trying to reach his attorney for comment. He spent more than 8 years behind bars for robbery with a dangerous weapon, state records show. Earlier this year, Brown was charged with misuse of 911 after he allegedly asked officers to investigate a man made material that controlled when he ate, walked, and talked, court documents state. Officers told Brown the issue was medical and there was nothing more they could do. Brown became upset and called 911, the records state. Charlotte Mayor V. Lyles offered her condolences and came under criticism for her response to the slaying. Her initial statement, days after Zarutska's death, did not identify the victim but focused on the suspect, homelessness, and mental illness. First and foremost, my thoughts and prayers go out to the young woman's family and friends. This is a tragic situation that sheds light on problems with society's safety nets related to mental health care and the systems that should be in place, Lyle's initial statement said. While I do not know the specifics of the man's medical record, what I have come to understand is that he has long struggled with mental health and appears to have suffered a crisis, the mayor said. I want to be clear that I am not villainizing those who struggle with their mental health or those who are unhoused, she continued. Also, those who are unhoused are more frequently the victim of crimes and not the perpetrators. We as a community must do better for those members of our community who need help and have no place to go. The mayor identified the victim in a social media post more than a week later. The video of the heartbreaking attack that took Arenya Zarutska's life is now public. I want to thank our media partners and community members who have chosen not to repost or share the footage out of respect of Arenya's family, the Democratic mayor wrote Saturday. Like so many of you, I'm heartbroken, and I've been thinking hard about what safety really looks like in our city. I remain committed to doing all we can to protect our residents and ensure Charlotte is a place where everyone feels safe. You know, after reading that, it actually is kind of a shit statement. The fact that she kind of tried to dance around the victim to not announce her name, I don't know. Maybe the family hadn't been informed yet. Maybe it took some time. I don't really know, but it definitely could have been crafted better, and it definitely could have put more focus on the mourning for this young lady who lost her life to a mentally deranged individual. But that brings me to my ultimate point with this, and that her statement isn't, I don't believe, entirely wrong. I took a minute out to take a look at how mentally ill individuals have been shifted from mental health facilities into the prison system over the last 70 or so odd years in America. And the fact that that actually probably is exacerbating the situation. We used to have state run mental health care facilities, mental hospitals for individuals that couldn't function in the real world in day to day society due to their mental impairments, delusions, whatever it may be, their ailments. And those beds have been reduced dramatically over the last 70 years, and the care or responsibility, rather, of these people has been shifted to the criminal justice system, which isn't designed to care for mentally ill individuals, not mentally ill to, this sort of degree, to the degree of delusion, schizophrenia, major bipolar disorder. These are people that require different and a much higher level of monitoring than the average criminal. And to better make my point, I'm going to go through this article from the Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law. It is titled The Shift of Psychiatric Inpatient Care from Hospitals to Jails and Prisons. And I'll go ahead and link this in the description in case you want to through the entire thing, because I'm not going to read the entire paper here on video. Excuse me. So the opening to the paper states far-reaching structural changes have been made in the mental health system. Many severely mentally ill person. So the paper starts out, the far-reaching structural changes have been made in the mental health. So the paper starts out, far-reaching structural changes have been made in the mental health system. Many severely mentally ill persons who come to the attention of law enforcement now receive their inpatient treatment in jails and prisons, at least in part because of a dramatic reduction of psychiatric inpatient beds. While more high-quality community treatment, such as intensive case management and assertive community treatment, is needed, the authors believe that for many, 24-hour structured care is needed in the mental health system for various lengths of time to decrease criminalization. Another central theme of this article is that when a mentally ill individual is arrested, that person now has a computerized criminal record, which is easily accessed by the police and the courts in subsequent encounters. This may influence their decisions and reinforce the tendency to choose the criminal justice system over the mental health system. Over the past few decades in the United States, there has been a profound paradigm or model shift in the care of persons with severe mental illness. For many, their psychiatric inpatient care is now provided in jail and prisons. This, in large part, may be the result of structural changes that have been made in the mental health system, namely a radical reduction in long term, intermediate, and short term psychiatric inpatient treatment under mental health jurisdiction. Moreover, few in the mental health field discuss the need for inpatient treatment, despite evidence that some persons with severe mental illness cannot be effectively treated and or managed in the community and require 24-hour structured care. Um, so, right there, it must be obvious to people if you've ever actually dealt with somebody with a severe mental health issue, not just the passing blues or something like that, but true mental delusion, psychosis. You know that those people do in fact require round the clock monitoring. Simply throwing them in a cell and coming back in the morning and feeding them and letting them out for some rec time, and then they get, an hour of counseling or whatever, is not adequate for somebody that is suffering severe mental delusion. They require professional mental health care 24 hours a day, accessible to professional health care, and they're not getting it in our prisons. And ultimately, what seems to happen is that, they're given a sentence, they serve out the sentence without receiving the necessary treatment to actually address their underlying mental health issue, and they go out and reoffend because where we put them wasn't actually a solution. It was just a punishment. It was nothing but punitive and in no way helpful to a person that may have a very low likelihood of criminality were it not for their inability to perceive the world as it is rather than to be, engulfed by delusion. Um, and how it's been such a drastic change too. The next part of the article is shaping populations. As shown, blah, blah, blah. By the year 2000, the number of state hospital beds had dropped from its high in 1955 of 339 per 100,000 to just 22 per 100,000 on any given day. Some states have gone even further. For instance, in California, there are currently fewer than two non forensic state hospital beds per 100,000 population. Statistic, Statistics from the criminal justice system are also striking. The total number of inmates, including those who are mentally ill in federal and state prisons and local jails, rose from 209 per 100,000 population in 1978 to 708 per 100,000 population in 2000. How many of the almost 2 million inmates in jails and prisons are severely mentally ill? The latest methodologically sound estimates of the number of persons in jails and prisons diagnosed with major depression, schizophrenia, and other psychotic disorders and bipolar disorder yielded percentages that ranged from 16 to 24%. By using the lower percentage, 16%, in order to avoid overstating this phenomena, as well as using the last year for which we have reliable state hospital data, which was 2000, we show in Table 3 that the estimates of severely mentally ill inmates in jails and prisons in 2000 was at least 310,000 or 113 per 100,000 population. The estimate of 113 per 1,000 is approximately half of all inmates who were in federal, state, and local custody in 1978. 209 per 100,000 population for reference. It is highly unlikely that half the jail and prison population in 1978 had severe mental illness. I just want a little Mike Tyson on that last word. But yeah, so therein I think lies one of our major problems with the criminality of the insane. I don't think that that's a politically correct term anymore, but that's what I'm going to go with right now. But I think that the criminally insane not going to state-run hospitals and receiving proper round-the-clock mental health care, and rather being thrown into, holes with other criminals is probably a bad idea for society. And there is there's obviously always the discussion of cost and the fact, the idea rather that we can't afford this, but we can afford to send billions of dollars to Ukraine to fight a war that isn't ours. We can, send $400 million to Iran on a plane. Billions and billions of dollars are just disappearing or were rather disappearing into USAID. The idea that we can't afford state-run hospitals to treat the mentally ill instead of just simply throwing them away for some predetermined sentence and then letting them out, regardless of whether or not their mental health issues have been treated, resolved. Uh, this is clearly a bad idea. And I don't think that increased sentencing is necessarily going to fix the issue. I don't think that increased policing is never necessarily going to fix this issue because actual criminals will tend to try and not commit a crime if they know that there's a large, strong police presence in an area. But somebody that's delusional, they're not attacking somebody out of, want for material items or something like this. They are doing this because of a delusion that is not going to be at all blunted or diminished by the presence of law enforcement. Stronger policing is not an answer to this very specific problem. We do most certainly in our major cities need more policing. We do need laws to be enforced. We do need sentencing to be harsher on a great number of the people committing criminal activity in America. Don't get me wrong. This is not in any way a call for defunding the police or anything silly like that. It is a call for um, discernment between those who are criminal because they choose to be and those who end up in the criminal justice system because they lack capacity and have not received adequate treatment for their mental illness. I think we need to separate these two groups so that we can treat them accordingly. That is the argument that I'm making, and ultimately, probably the argument that the mayor of Charlotte was making. So, as I said, I agree with her statement. It could have been crafted way better. Um, Obviously, there were a lot of considerations made when crafting that statement, with regard to electability, with regard to her Democratic constituency, and especially her far left constituency. And that is really unfortunate that she, in a way, diminished the light of this poor young lady that was, killed by a lunatic. But that in and of itself, it doesn't at all discredit the fact that she's right. That we need a better way of separating those suffering from persistent mental health issues and those who are simply selfish, greedy, violent criminals. Um, I think that the money is there. If you happen to check out this article, they're there towards the end. They um, cite a few studies, I believe, that show that mental health, state hospitals can actually be operated more cheaply than prisons. Um, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I think it's something that needs to be figured out either way. The money for state-run hospitals needs to be found. They need to be brought back, and they need to be monitored very, very stringently so that we can avoid the, horror stories that you hear about state-run hospitals in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But there's a better solution to this problem, this very specific problem of mental health criminality than the criminal justice system and just predetermined prison sentences. So that's going to be it for this one. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know in the comments how you feel about the mentally ill. Should they just keep going to prisons with the rest of the criminals, or should we try and separate them from that population and maybe treat them a little bit differently? I don't know. I'm not a doctor.